Well, hi everyone. I appreciate that right now we all might be feeling uh, just a little bit tired. And I want to acknowledge this because I think there is an incredible pressure right now, culturally, but definitely I'm feeling it within church and church leadership, to come out of lockdown all guns blazing. Like, we need to set that up again. We need to do that. We need to get some stuff done. And what I'm sensing Jesus saying to me is exactly the opposite. Saying, slow down, bring it all back to basics. And so that's what we want to do at our church. Is we want to slow down. We want to bring it back to basics, bring it back to community, worship, enjoying Jesus, hanging out with each other. So that's what we are going to do. And this morning we're looking at knowing our limits. And we've been going through a book called The Emotionally Healthy Church, which has shaped a lot of the second part of this series. And the author, Peter Scazzaro, in the opening to the chapter on knowing your limits, says that emotionally healthy people understand the limits that God has given them. You see, in our culture at the moment, to impose limits of any sort is absolute heresy. People turn around and say, how dare you tell me I can't? How dare you tell me I shouldn't? I'll do it if I want to. If I want to go there, no one can stop me. You see, limits in our culture are seen as a barrier to freedom. We think if we just get rid of all the limitations that we have, be they physical, social, economic, whatever it is, if we get rid of all of them, right, then we'll be free. My freedom lies the other side of whatever limitations I feel are placed on my life. But that's pride talking. That's us placing ourselves at the center of our own lives and saying, I will do things my way. And God doesn't have a say in it. See, I imagine if we spoke that way to, or rather, if our children spoke that way to us, we'd be really hurt. Because the only reason I put any limitations on my children's lives is because I love them and I want what's best for them. And so I say, no, actually, that's not going to happen. And you can't see it from your perspective. I understand that. But I promise you, I'm doing this because I love you. It's not good for you to do that. It's not good for you to go there or see that, whatever it is. You know, it's done in love. And the same is true of God. He is a loving and a good Father who places limitations in our lives to bless us, to give us more of the fullness of life that He has created us for. And we cannot say that as we've continued to try and get rid of all of our limitations, whatever they may be, that we don't have any problems. I mean, the stats don't lie. In a recently published government paper, and I'm literally quoting directly from it now, it says the rate of work-related stress, depression and anxiety disorders has increased in recent years. In 2019 and 2020, stress, depression or anxiety accounted for 51% of all work-related ill health cases and 55% of all working days lost due to work-related ill health. A 2018 study suggested that women between 20 and 35 and over 55 are most likely to burn out. A more recent study in 2020 of 1,000 UK adults suggested that 22% of those 1,000 adults, that's nearly a quarter, had experienced work-related burnout. And that was, interestingly, most prevalent among men. Finally, between August 2019 and 2020, Google searches for occupational burnout rose 184%. Now, back in the days of the Bible, you would walk around ancient Corinth and you'd see a temple to this and a temple to that and a temple to something else. And actually, we don't live in such a different place at all, that we have lots of temples set up in our culture, lots of places that we go to worship, and the workplace is absolutely one of them now. Because we have a culture that says, I am what I do. And if I want to mean something, it means I have to do something. And so we go to our workplaces and we worship there and we give ourselves there. We sacrifice ourselves there in order to prove to people that we're worth something, that we matter. And then we work harder and harder because we need to keep proving that we are worth something, that we matter. And actually, this can get to the point where it becomes an addiction. You know, we start getting a fix from it, and then we're like, right, that seems to be giving me something, but it doesn't last. It never lasts. So then we have to work harder, just like a real addiction. You have to do it more in order to get the same fix again. And so it goes on until it can become even self-harm. But what we see in our passage today, and actually in the life of Jesus, is that he plays a very different game. That Jesus has a completely different way of living. That he is happily bound, firstly, by the limitations of his humanity, and secondly, by the calling upon his life, which acts as a filter through which everything that he thinks he might have to do passes through, and only the things that get through that filter are the things that he actually goes and does. Jesus knows who he is, and he knows what he's supposed to do. And we see that in our story today. Jesus has been ministering to lots of different people. And then him and his disciples, you know, they've been up late. They've been praying for people, seen lots of healing. It's amazing. They go to bed. And then Jesus rises early in the morning to go and spend time with his Father, to be refreshed and renewed, to be affirmed in his identity, but also to test his filter. So God, what do you have for me to do today? That's what he's praying. Are we staying here or are we going somewhere else? And what's interesting is he comes back and people are like baying for his time. They're like, Jesus, where have you been? Look, we've got this massive queue of people who need healing. You need to get here. You need to do stuff right now. And Jesus just turns and he says, no, we're not staying here. We're going on to the next place. Because where he was went through the filter and it didn't pass the test. It wasn't where he was called that day. So on he went. So if Jesus respected the limitations of his humanity and the limitations of his calling, then we should as well. And so this starts by reminding ourselves who we are. Now, we've done a lot of that work earlier on in our series, but there's something else that I think I want to pick up here when we're thinking about limitations and living lives that are lovingly limited. So as I've said, Jesus spends time with his Father to be affirmed and to know more of who he is, and we need this. And I am reminded every time I do a funeral, because there are words in it that just, they cut to the core, I think. As I say at a funeral, for God knows of what we are made. He remembers that we are but dust. From dust we have come, Genesis 2, and to dust we shall return, Psalm 90. We are not superhuman. Like the Avengers, they're going to be taking a hard pass on our application paper. Nah, sorry. You're not coming here. You haven't got anything to offer us. You're very normal. And we are. And God knows this. But our human limitations, they don't shock him. It's not like, some Premier League manager who's signed a £100 million striker and is expecting at least 30 goals a season from him. That is not God's bag. He knows that in us, he signed a non-league Wednesday night 5-a-side trier. Like, that's fine. He knows full well what he signed up for in saving us. And not only that, he's well aware that we're all completely different. He is not expecting the same thing from you as he is from me, as he is from the next person. We are all created equal, but we are all different. I have friends who can achieve so much more than me in a week and still have plenty of energy to give family, friends, loved ones, hobbies, whatever. If I worked like them, I'd be dead. Just couldn't manage it because God has given me certain limitations and they have different ones. And so we need to understand these limitations, and then we need to inhabit them and use them. Because as we do, we'll find that there's life there for us and it brings glory to God. See, no one would look at the life of Jesus and say he failed. Yet ultimately, actually, he invested in a handful of people. And then he died on the cross and said, it's finished. Like, I've done the work you sent me to do, Father, and it is finished. It's done. And sure enough, we have the global movement of Christianity, and there are people still meeting the living Jesus every single day. But it seemed so limited. So we need to start by remembering that we are limited beings, and that is okay. Next, we need a process for diagnosing ourselves. See, when Jesus spends time with his Father, I imagine some of the work he's doing is just to check in with himself in God's presence. And this is a really good spiritual practice. This art of reflection, as you get into the presence of God, you say, okay, God, I'm with you. Lord, where am I at? How do I feel right now? Am I walking in step with you? Am I pushing too hard? These are good questions to be asking ourselves in the presence of God as we come to pray. So let me offer you now some self-diagnosis criteria that I've taken from the Emotionally Healthy Church's book as a tick list. So as I say them, think, yeah, is that going on in my life? And if it is, then maybe we want to do some thinking about pulling back from the limits that we're pushing. So, are you struggling with regular and constant anxiety? Are you rushing or hurrying all the time? Does your body feel like it's tied in a knot? Is your mind continually racing, unable to switch off? When you get in your car, are you driving too fast? Do you regularly have light or interrupted sleep? Are you not really present when you're with other people? Are you struggling to emotionally connect with those around you? Are you irritated by simple tasks or small mishaps? Do you have the overwhelming desire to control everything around you? Are you skimming over time with God? I wonder if any of these resonate with you. And can I suggest that if you're ticking more than one box for a certain amount of time, that is because you are pushing the limits that God has given you. And if you keep doing that, you will head into burnout, and that is serious. So I want to offer, in light of what I've just said, some really practical, helpful thoughts to how, if we've identified that we might be pushing our limits, how do we pull back from them? And there are a few simple things that we can do. Firstly, and I've made them all begin with S because I'm kind like that, so you might be able to remember them as well. Or maybe it's just cheesy and I should stop. I don't know. But anyway, first one, sleep. We all need sleep. Let me give you some stats. 36% of UK adults struggle to get to sleep at least on a weekly basis. Nearly half of the UK have trouble falling asleep at least once a month. Our sleep hygiene is all over the place, but let me give you some good news. God doesn't need sleep. He is always at work, and this should comfort us, because if we are held in his hands, if we are his beloved, if he has said, I am with you always, and I am working for your good, and I will look after you, and I will give you my best because I'm a good father, then that means that when we're asleep, he is still working for those ends in our lives. He's still working to glorify himself in our lives. He's still working in those situations that we think we have to control in order to make them work out. He's still doing all that because he doesn't need to sleep, but we absolutely do. In fact, for us to suggest that we don't need much sleep and to not prioritize it is to put us on par with the God who doesn't sleep, and putting ourselves on par with God never really ends well. And Jesus, let's look at him. I mean, he took sleep really seriously. In fact, he knew he needed sleep on a boat ride across a lake, and a storm is raging around him, but he's like, I've got to sleep. It's important that I sleep. I know I need my sleep. And I think in that moment we see as well that sleep and rest, as I was saying a few weeks ago in my standalone sermon, it's an act of faith. It's an act of trust. It's saying, God, I commit myself into your hands. There's a lovely psalm which actually you say if you do the daily office in the Church of England, if you do Compline, which is like night prayer. And it's from Psalm 4, verse 8. You say, I will lie down and sleep in peace. For you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety. So if we need sleep, here's some really practical thoughts. And I'm not trying to be patronizing, but there's just things that we get out of the habit of and we just need someone to say again. So, starters, if we need sleep, start going to bed earlier. Don't watch the next episode of whatever it is. You know, give yourself some space before you go to bed where you're not filling your head with stuff. Do not check your phone or your emails just before you go to bed. Do not take your phone to your bedroom. Don't do your work right up to the point where you're expecting to sleep. Give yourself time to wind down and slow down. And perhaps you want to consider creating a routine. We do it for our children to help them sleep, but we need them too. I have a very short one. I just go up to my bedroom, I get in my pajamas, I say my prayers, I get into bed, and then I will read until my eyes won't stay open, and then I'll fall asleep. And that works for me. Short, simple, sweet, but it means that I'm able to sleep. And it's really interesting that for me, sleep is one of my warning signs. I know when I'm pushing my limit because my sleep falls apart, and then I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Where am I pushing it too hard? So for me, it's a real trigger, or it shows me that there's something wrong, but also it's a really good place to start in terms of finding a fix. So let's prioritize sleep. And I appreciate that some of you are in a very special season of grace because you got young babies, and let's just pray for you. You're tired. And you're like, yeah, I'd love sleep. And I'm like, yeah, I hear you. I understand. It's coming. Keep going. You're doing amazingly well. So Jesus prioritizes sleep. So should we. Number 2, Sabbath. We need a day off. We need a Sabbath. Do yourself and everyone else around you a favor and take at least one day off a week. A senior doctor once wrote, we doctors in the treatment of nervous dispositions are compelled to provide periods of rest. Some of these periods are, I think, only Sundays in arrears. You are not special. You need a day off like everyone else. And Jesus models this to us. We see throughout the scriptures, he keeps the Sabbath. And he also tells us that God has made the Sabbath for us. It is his gift to us. He says, here's the Sabbath. Enjoy the space that's being created for you. Become present again to life and everything that's going on around you, the people that are living around you. And that's so hard because we are living in a culture without limits. And because of that, we feel like every bit of space should be filled with something. But the Sabbath is a space where there is no agenda. It's a space where we're not trying to distract ourselves. We need it. And it's written into creation. I'm back in Genesis again at the moment, just being reminded, like, God wrote it into the created order. That part of our fullness of living is resting and having a day, a week, at least to stop, to slow, to breathe, to be present, and to just have space. And do you know what's every bit of space that you create in your life, you are investing in your future self and you are investing in the people around you. And every bit of space that you decide to give back to distraction or to work or whatever, when you should be resting, you are taking from your future self and taking from the people around you. That this has a knock-on effect. It's not just you it affects when you decide not to rest. Other people are caught in the crossfire. And maybe for Sabbath, just, again, get rid of the phone, turn it off, or put it in a coat pocket so it's not near you and you can just check it when you feel that you need to. Perhaps make it a space where you're like, we will have a family meal here. We will intentionally eat together, and we'll have some questions that we always ask each other at the meal. Who wants to share how they're doing? How are things going with Jesus? What's been your favourite thing this week? What are you feeling a bit anxious about next week? I don't know. Have some questions that you just use to connect with each other as you have a Sabbath meal, which is something that Jesus would have done. And it's a beautiful thing to try and work in. And finally, with the Sabbath, we want to become people that have a rhythm where we work from our Sabbath, not towards it. So we're not like, I just need to keep going and then I can stop, but rather in our stopped place, in our rest place, in our place of space and presence, actually we're going, this is giving to next week. This is allowing me to participate fully in next week because I took this moment. Okay, so that was number 2, Sabbath. Number 3, socializing. We need friends. And don't we know it right now? I mean, we have felt robbed of social interaction over the last year and a half. It's been really hard, especially for me as a massive extrovert. Like, I'm remembering what it's like to be energized again as I start to see people and just chat to them. It's really wonderful. But we need each other. God's plan for the church is a genius idea. He's like, you need each other. You need this connection. And we see it in Jesus. He prioritizes connecting with people, having deep and proper relationships with them where he bears himself and they bear themselves, and you trust each other and you share vulnerably life that you might grow together and have this sort of friendship. We see it with David and Jonathan in the Old Testament. They have this deep and intimate friendship where they say, I am in this with you to the end. We've got each other's backs. Guys, we need this in our lives. We have to dare to trust each other, be vulnerable with each other, and grow together as friends. We have to open our lives to each other. It's good for us. If we don't, we will miss out on so much of what makes life beautiful. So please don't get too busy for friendship. Prioritize it. Invest in it. It is good for your soul. And if I may, for a moment, just speak to those of you who are married. Prioritize the friendship you have with your spouse. Your friends and your lovers. Don't neglect the friendship of your marriage. And as your friends, you're also lovers, I want to say, don't neglect your sex life. Yeah, I've gone there and I've said it. It's a good gift from God to you in marriage. And it's the first thing to disappear when we push boundaries, when we push limits. I want to say, invest in your marriage, in friendship, and in your sex life, your intimate life together, in connection. It's so important. So important. So that's 3. We need friends. Last of all, number 4, space. We need inward renewal. So Jesus models this time and time again. You'll see it throughout the Gospels. It says Jesus withdrew to a quiet place. Jesus went off to spend time with his Father. And he had to do that to be renewed by God inwardly, because he was in this limited human mortal frame. He knew he needed the refreshment of his Father each and every single day. And if Jesus needed that, we absolutely need that. We need to be filled with the Holy Spirit each day. And I know even as I'm saying this, some of you are going on a massive guilt trip. Oh, here we go. Yeah, okay. I'm not praying enough. I'm not doing. That's not what I'm saying. We do desperately need our daily times with God, but it is not to impress him. God does not need us to spend time with him, but we need to spend time with God. God is offering us himself. And all we do if we don't do it is rob ourselves of him. He's not angry. We just miss out. And so we need that space with God, and that helps us to joyfully understand our limitations and therefore live within them and experience more of the fullness of life that we were created to live. Now, I watched a program very recently called Sort Your Life Out. And basically, a group of people go into a very cluttered house and they take everything out of it and then they lay it all out in a warehouse. And then they say to the people living in the house, you've got to get rid of half this stuff. And then they sort of declutter and then they bring them back in. They're like, whoa, my life has been completely transformed because I didn't actually need all that stuff. Now, may I suggest that this is what we might need to do with our inner lives? That we might need to sort of write it all out in front of us, like, where am I at? What am I feeling? What am I struggling with? What's currently taking a lot of time? What, all of that sort of stuff, write it out on a big piece of paper and start to see it in front of us so that we can then begin to take steps to help us grow in our inner lives. What's interesting is these people are stuck and they cannot do it until a team go in and help them to begin the process. So for some of us, we might look at our inner lives and think this is so cluttered, I need a professional. And so in that case, we go to counselling, and we've got a really high view of counselling at our church. We think it's incredibly helpful. It's been a huge blessing to me in my life, and I highly recommend it. And perhaps for some of us, we need that starting place to start to declutter. And so we go to counselling, and obviously you can come and talk to me, and we can look at arranging that for you. But some of us, we might just need a bit of leadership. We might just need someone to say, hey, why don't you start going in this direction? Okay, so we have a spiritual discipline series we did last year called Slow Down. There are 6 episodes, I don't know what else to call them, where I just talk you through a spiritual discipline, as in we do it together. That would be a really good place to start. Say, okay, I'm going to watch that and give that a go and give it a try and just do that for a week. 5 of the 6, do it over Monday to Friday and see if it helps you. Or there's things like the Lectio 365 app. There's the daily prayer app. There are the Northumbria community online. There is so much stuff out there to lead you, to guide you through a time with God and start to develop these healthy habits in prayer and in spirituality that will genuinely impact your life for the better and help you to meet with Jesus. But can I share one thing that I think will convict many of us that has really helped me? So it's highly amusing of God that he's got me doing this talk this week, because last week I was like, I am pushing my limits. I am well beyond my limits. I am not in a good place. My sleep had gone and I was really distracted. And the thing that has dramatically helped me to start spending quality time with God again is to get rid of my phone again. And I haven't chucked it out. But what I mean is this. That there are moments when you're in your day and you think, oh, bit of space. Not really doing anything. Just check Instagram. Just check Facebook. I wonder if anyone's WhatsApped me. I'll just see what's happened on BBC Sport. I'll just check my emails. Oh, wait, no, I did all this 2 minutes ago. And we fill the space with distraction. We're like, right, I've got a bit of space. I need to distract myself. Right? And what I have actively said to myself, which has been kind of a rule of life and then forgotten about, and I've just reignited it again, is I will not fill my space with distraction from my phone. And literally at points it's been like out and I'm like, no, and I'm putting it back in my pocket or whatever, or putting it back in my coat, just like get it away from me. It has dramatically impacted my spiritual life. Like, I cannot tell you the lightness of spirit, even in like 4 or 5 days, that has begun to sort of show itself. My ability to sort of sit with God, find peace, listen, all that sort of stuff has been so different. I cannot tell you. So, phones, I just think, Lord of the Rings, when there's that famous quote at the start, which is like, one ring to rule them all and one ring to find them. One ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. I genuinely think now that we could say that about mobile phones. One thing to rule them all, one thing to find them, one thing to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. I'm like, it's our phones. It's what's happened. And sure, they can be tools for good, and I appreciate that, and we need them, and blah, 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 blah. But actually, just in terms of this stuff, they are ruining our lives, and we need to take a stand and say, I'm not having it. You don't get to say how I live my life, and you don't get to say how I use my time. That's my choice, and I'm taking it back. So, phones. Also, just think, what brings you life? What do you love doing? You know, we talked about laying out our whole lives. Look at your whole life and think, what is good? What is helpful? What is life-giving? What is draining? What is bad? What is unhelpful? And then you think, what do I have to do? And what am I choosing to do? And then you start deciding, well, in that week, you know, that's quite a draining week. I need to put some good stuff in there as well. So we start to see this balance between life-giving and life-taking, and maybe make some choices where we just chuck some stuff out as well because it needs to happen. So that's the last one, space. Needing that inward renewal. So let me finish. Friends, if Jesus needed sleep, Sabbath, socializing, and space day by day, so do we. We need it. So a joyful life lived within God's limitations is possible for us. And let me say this to you, God is not trying to take from you. By you introducing these things, he's not trying to take from your life. He loves you. He wants to give to you. He wants to give you his best. And these things will help us to start receiving his best rather than settling for the mud pies. God has a banquet for us. So we remember we're limited. We realize when we're on the edge, and we remedy that with sleep, with Sabbath, with socializing, and with space, that inward renewal day by day. And we do that with God, the God who loves us, the God who loves you. This is what he wants for you. So I empower you, friends, to make that choice today, that we would start afresh this morning, living within the limitations of God and, the limitations of all that God has placed upon our lives, that we might start to live in the fullness of life that he has for us.